as she said, I'm Beth Morrison, and tonight I'm going to tell you about my journey of how I discovered that I am indeed a fact, a human trafficking survivor. And can you guys hear me back there?
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Mikhail Moore. I am the oldest of 4 children, and I am here today to tell you what it was like for me growing up as a child of a human trafficking survivor.
As you guys have heard a lot tonight about catch court, I came through catch court through the back door. I didn't consider myself a human trafficking victim. And I basically got there because I didn't want to go back to the penitentiary for the 5th time. So as I had been there through my little over 2-year journey, and I began to hear women like Vanessa and others, I started hearing their stories, and I began to relate to them, and I understood, and I started saying, you know, that happened to me. And I started beginning to say to myself, maybe I am a human trafficking survivor. And the longer that I was there, it was like I started crossing this bridge of understanding. And I would often go to Hannah, and Hannah is one of the catch court coordinators. And I would say, Hannah, how does a smart girl like me, how does this happen to me? I'm like, explain this again. Tell me how I'm a human trafficking survivor. And she would tell me. And often I would feel like I almost had it. Like I almost understood. I'd almost buy into it. Because like I said, often I thought that these were things that I chose. Like, I chose to go with that guy, or I chose this. And by the end of my 2-year journey, when I sat down to do my human trafficking assessment, I had this moment that I like to call my head to heart moment, where it went from my head to my heart, where the people that I'd grown to know and love, that I trusted, and I believed what they were saying to me, all that knowledge went to my heart, and it exploded for me, and it became very real. And I said to myself, I am a human trafficking survivor.
Now, my first experience coming into catch court, my mom kind of dragged me down. I was not wanting to go. I was like, I'm not on that law and order stuff. So, as I'm sitting there, you know, she gets me to come down, and I walk through the doors, and it's like a lion's den. I mean, women everywhere, you know, everybody's talking. Judge Herbert's actually walking through the crowds, and he's shaking everybody's hand, and he's asking them how they're doing. And, you know, at first I'm thinking he's just talking to the audience, you know. And I see a table up front. There's, you know, 12 to 15 chairs. And then the court proceeds, and I see all the mentors and the women walk up. And, you know, at first I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of defendants. But that wasn't really the case. When I went in there, it was like Thanksgiving. Literally. Like, we had food, everything. It was awesome. And everybody's standing around, you know, they're getting to know each other. They're talking about, you know, all the things they're going through and what's really affecting them, not only in the past, but that day to day. And right then and there, I got to see, you know, the support that I had been given my mom wasn't enough, that I need to give more support than I had been.
So during this 2-year journey, I too was sent to Amethyst, and I began to go through this process of learning a lot about myself. And there were these core issues that I learned. And I'm going to share 3 of the really big ones for me. One of the core issues was children are to be seen and not heard. What happens here stays here. And my feelings were never validated. So with what happens here stays here, creates that toxic shame in us. And it's like, you know, when I can't talk about what happens here, that's saying this is really bad, this is really ugly, we're not going to let this be known that this ever happened. And sometimes we didn't even talk about that in our house. We're just going to pretend that this never happened. And it was almost like this duct tape was put over my mouth. And I didn't know what to do with that. So, that's where children are meant to be seen and not heard. I couldn't talk about it. So, and with that, I was this very inquisitive child, and I had lots of questions. And today, instead of being a sophomore in college, I should have my PhD. And, I'm intrigued with culture and wanting to travel and things like that. And instead of that being nurtured, I was told that I was nosy, I needed to mind my own business. And it was just really pushed down, and it caused me not to ask questions, which came to hurt me later on when I needed to ask those questions when people were having me do things that I didn't necessarily want to do. And so with my feelings never being validated, it came to the point where you were telling me how I felt. I didn't know how I felt. And I was reminded of that this year when I was watching a video on Facebook where I seen this guy going through the haunted house. And he's taking like his 7 or 8-year-old daughter in there. And today, I was freaked out by the haunted houses because they're like really vivid with all the makeup and stuff. There's no way you're going to catch me in one of those places. And he's taking his daughter in there, and she is screaming and crying. And he's like, "It's okay, baby. Daddy's got you. You're going to be all right." He's like, "We don't live like that today. Stop crying." And I'm like, that's me. That's me right there. My feelings were never validated. How do you expect this child not to be terrified? And so with that, all these issues happened. And so it led me to that point where I'm sitting there at this assessment with Hannah. And it all come rushing back for me when I got ready to tell her my story.
Now, how we grew up actually pretty similar. I didn't live with my mom the whole time. I lived with her family members as well, her brother, my uncle. I lived with my grandma as well, off and on throughout, my whole childhood until I was about 18. There's 2 stories, for instance, where I can actually point out the same things happening to me. The first story is, when I was 6 years old, my mom had gone through a really, really bad breakup. And at that point in time, she was a functioning addict, but that's where she lost her function. And that night, she ended up telling me, "Hey, Kale, I'll be back. I'm just going to go to the store." She didn't come home that night. The next day came around. My uncle knew. He came to the door, and he knocked on the door. And I'm sitting at the door, and this is where, what happens here stays here. He's knocking on the door, and I'm like, "You can't come in. My mom's asleep. She's not there at all." And he's like, "Well, let me use the restroom." "Well, she's not comfortable with people coming in." "Well, she's asleep." She wasn't there at all because I understood, what happens here stays here. Nobody needs to know what's going on. And then there's another story where children are meant to be seen and not heard. And I actually experienced this through my uncle. He was actually supposed to go pick up his wife at work, and we were all going to go to the baseball game by way of his mother-in-law. Well, needless to say, I overheard the conversation, and he didn't go pick her up. I knew he was supposed to go pick her up. And I voiced that. I expressed, trying to be helpful. That bit me in the butt, because right then and there, they told me, "That's not your place to say anything. You're meant to be seen, not heard." So that's another experience that, we share in our family that we recognize in the cycle.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm doing the assessment with Hannah, and I start telling her this story of this really hot guy that was a neighbor guy. And I had forgotten all about this situation. And every teenage girl has a crush on an older guy. And I was 17 at the time. And as I'm unfolding this story, more and more it's starting to make sense to me. And I'm telling her how I used to stop and have these conversations with him, and little flirt. I used to flirt with him and stuff, and I would love to be able to tell you exactly what those conversations were. I can't quite remember. but I do remember this, that I had joined a community volleyball league. And one day when I went, he was there. And he had given me a ride home. And I ended up at his house. And his wife and children were at Bible study. He was a deacon in the church. And he got me in his bedroom. And I was standing naked at the end of his bed. 17-year-old girl. And my feelings were never validated. I was validated through other people and things. And a lot like what Vanessa said, he said, I'm sure he said all the right things. And as I was standing there, he said, are you okay? And for the first time in a long time, I was trembling. I was scared. I didn't know how to get out of that situation because I really didn't want to do it. But you always tell me how I feel. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. As I'm trembling, scared to death because I really don't know how to back out now. And I went ahead and I had sex with this man. Now I think he really likes me because he just chose me over his wife. And I'm not emotionally mature enough to handle this situation. And I don't know what to do with this. And it wasn't hard to teach me what happens here stays here because that was embedded in me since I can remember. And I went home and I would continue to have sex with this man and go to volleyball. And I would call his house, and if his wife answered, I'd just hang up. And so this continued on for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, I don't remember. Well, one day my mom and my stepfather got called down to the police station. And I was asked if I was the girl with the phone harassment hanging up on the wife. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And and I don't remember why I told him I did it. Who knows what I said. But I remember I was asked if I was having sex with him. Well, no, of course not. And the police had asked my parents to leave the room, and when they asked me again, I denied it. What happens here stays here. No, I wasn't having sex with him. And nobody really drilled me. Nobody interrogated me that day. And when I left that police station, I left on probation. I left on house arrest for the summer. And it totally changed my last year of high school. My friends were off doing other things while I was stuck. I've got to go to the park. All I was allowed to do was go to the park, and that's where I met my first bad boy. And he validated me. He validated my feelings. But when I got home that day, my mom didn't say, hey, what happened? She didn't intervene with the police like, wait a minute, my daughter's a good kid. Something happened. No, they looked at me like that judge that the judge showed on the thing, like, what did you do wrong? Why did you do that? I was a good kid. I wasn't on drugs. I got good grades. I played sports. I worked in the vice principal's office. No one said, what happened? Nobody looked into this. And when I'm telling Hannah this story, it was like I had this outer body experience where I'm looking down at 17-year-old Beth, and I could see all these unheard mixed messages that I'd been taught at Amethyst, and I could clearly see how I got set up to be the perfect victim for abuse, to be trafficked, to be used, to not understand how my life went awry. And she was like, the justice system failed you. And I was angry at the justice system. I was angry at my parents. I was angry that no one had taught me, no one had saved me. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to let anybody hurt you the way you have been hurt.
Come on.
And I walked away, totally changed that day.
Now, growing up on and off with my mom, I got to be around some of those men that she dated, some of the men that manipulated her, coerced her, beat her. One of them she had to stab. It got to that point. And there was one boyfriend in particular that I liked the most. He was also the boyfriend that had caused the dysfunction out of my mom's functioning habit. When she ended up leaving me, I had been in that house for like 2 days, and he had came by, and I didn't know that they had broken up at the time. I didn't know any of that. And I really looked up to this guy. He was the guy shot a basketball with first. I'd never done that with my own dad. And as you know, I'm realizing they're breaking up. I'm going home to my grandma's. You know, I always wondered what had happened with that. Later on, I got to realize what truly happened in that scenario. This man had a wife and kids. They had been together for almost a year. Like my mom and this man had been together for almost a year, and we had no idea that he had a wife and kids. So he was manipulating her this whole time. And, you know, looking back on it now, like, I see myself being that guy. I'm realizing my perspective on women has never been the right perspective on women. Like, I'm looking at them as, I'm not going to, like, for lack of a better word, but a piece of meat. I wasn't treating women the way they needed to be treated. And I started noticing, like, I had developed those same player tendencies that I saw in this guy, that I valued it as almost a father figure at that point in time. So I was like, me and my mom, we start building our relationship back together when I'm 18. You know, my perspective on women are still the same like that. It was still the same like that at that time. And I'm taking everything as a grain of salt with my mom because, you know, like I said, she had left me alone. I had a lot of angst and remorse towards her. And we're starting to build up our relationship. We're starting to get stronger together. She's dragging me to more meetings and stuff. You know, this is what I'm prepared for. But the more I keep going to these meetings, the more I'm seeing support for my mom, the more I'm seeing all the help she's getting. One of the greatest moments happened. Like I said, I'm the oldest of 4 children. All my other 3 siblings are adopted. And we got to finally meet 2 of my youngest siblings through the Hirschbergers, which is their adopted family. And right then and there, that's when I noticed like my trust for my mom really started building up. I always had love for my mom, but I got to see the value of that love and what it was doing. And it all really transpired one night when we ended up going to Circus Soleil. And, you know, I'm like, man, this is pretty cool, Mom. You know, I can't believe the Hirsch's bought this. She's, Kale, that was me. I did this. Wait, you spent your own money and you work at Donato's. Like, you bought these Circus Soleil tickets. She's like, yeah. Like, how much did they cost? Like $300. You work at Donato's. What do you mean? You bought $300 tickets. So, like, as realizing, you know, that love was always there. But that relationship really got built even more then, and not just through those tickets, but through this catch court experience.
So we're still working on building our trust and building our relationship, and things aren't perfect. And, you know, me discovering these unsaid messages and things about myself, but I can tell you that what happens here doesn't stay here anymore. Okay. I've managed to rip that duct tape off. I don't let the shame hold me down. And I would like to extend that to you tonight. Don't let shame hold you back. What happens here doesn't need to stay here. You know, I'm not saying you need to air all your dirty laundry out, but please definitely find you a safe place to talk about what's going on and share that. Validate your feelings, and definitely listen to what's not being said. Don't say, my kid has good grades, and my kid has all these wonderful achievements, and this is going on, and all of a sudden you see a wrinkle in the water. Definitely pay attention to that wrinkle in the water, and say to yourself, what happened? Not, what did you do? Why are you doing that? Ask yourself, what's going on? And have that conversation. Have these difficult questions and inquire, because I guarantee you there's more behind that story than what you realize. And for some reason, they feel uncomfortable sharing. Make that safe place. I never had that safe place that I felt like I could open up. For one reason or another, I always thought I was going to get in trouble, or I didn't feel safe to talk about it. Today, me and Mikhail, we still fight, we still argue. It's not perfect. It's a lot better than it's ever been. You know, if there's just one takeaway I can say is definitely validate one another's feelings. You can't say, don't feel that way about it. You know, a person's perception might be wrong, but the way they feel is the way they feel.
Amen.
The one thing I want everybody to take away from this is that we are from a small town in Bull Fountain, Ohio, and you wouldn't expect human trafficking survivors to be a title of my mom. You wouldn't, not from where we come from. It's almost unheard of, it seems like. So the one thing I want everybody to take from this is this could literally be anybody. I mean, just this year they found 123 children up in Michigan that were being harbored for human trafficking. So you never know what's going on in these communities. You never know what's happening next door. You never know what cycles are being started. And this was just our way of finally being able to break the cycle of human trafficking.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Let's get another round of applause for all